What is going on, good people? What is going on? Listen, you are tuning in to what we call Elephant Conversations. I got me and my friend, Miss Nyah Lynn Edwards, in the house. Y'all, clap for Miss Nyah Lynn as she comes into his house
Woo!
today. Yeah. I'm telling you, Miss Nyah, we got another one, another elephant conversation. This time we're talking about this thing that we call him the Trojan horse, the Trojan horse. And let me
The
see,
Trojan horse.
and let me ask you this: when you think about the Trojan horse, do me a favor, tell people the backstory because I know some people are probably looking at this and like the Trojan horse. What is that? If they haven't read maybe some old school books and things, maybe they don't even know what the Trojan horse is. So let's take just a moment. Can you give them back like what happened with the Trojan horse?
I will tell you this. One of my favorite movies is Troy, and it starred Eric Bana and Brad Pitt. And
Mm-hmm.
so it really brought us to the forefront of the Trojan horse and all of that was around that story. In that Helen of Troy, one of the most beautiful alleged women of the world, right? And she left her home, left her husband, and left with another man. And so the army came to Troy to retrieve her.
Mm.
Now, in doing that, the city of Troy had never fallen before, had never fallen, right? And so it was impenetrable. And so what happened was the army decided to build this big hollow horse, store the men in it, and then give it as a gift. So they brought the gift of the Trojan horse into the walls, into the compounds of the fence, and they drank and was merry, went to sleep. And of course, the men came out and slaughtered everyone. And so when you think of the Trojan horse and you relate it to race, and that race has become the Trojan horse of America, and you think of how others are using racism as a way to divide and bring us down, God, we have to start looking at it just as that, as a Trojan horse. How some people will take it into organizations, that Trojan horse, some into schools, some into every parts of our society,
Yeah.
that Trojan horse.
What's so interesting? I never really thought about race as a Trojan horse. I mean, but when you phrase it in that way, it's the little subtle things that kind of have come into the normalcy of life for people, right? And it's almost like have you heard of the red dot on the wall theory?
No,
Basically, the red dot on the wall theory says, if I put a red dot on a wall and you come in the first day, you may see the red dot on the wall, right? But
okay,
if
yeah,
you right, but if you come over and over again and you see that red dot, eventually you won't even recognize it's there. Very much like your watch. Like somebody
yes,
probably is looking at the watch right now. You don't recognize that watch is there because you've gotten so accustomed to and so used to the watch, the red dot, the nuances of the world that we don't even think about these kinds of things anymore. And it's interesting that we would equate race to something like that.
yeah, yeah. And you know what, really, as I began sitting there thinking, and we were having a conversation about race as a Trojan horse of America, Putin he demonstrated that really well, that he
Mm,
was the Trojan horse. We as Americans have to stop saying that we don't have a racial problem because everybody else recognized that we do.
mm-hmm,
And he
mm-hmm.
was able to infiltrate us in the social media, put those ads in to
Yeah.
cause a great divide. That Trojan horse, he brought it right in. So if we
Mm,
don't have a race problem, why was he able to do that
yeah.
effectively?
Yeah.
Sadly, but effectively, because
Yeah.
we do have a race problem in America. And it's time for us to start dealing with it. It's time for us to start talking about it because, pretending for these last 2, 3, 4 decades have gotten us right back to where I never thought we would ever be.
Yeah, and I think you've said some amazing things in that we got to start talking about this thing. Like we can't pretend that race does not exist, that race is not a thing, and that racism is not real, because the
Yeah.
more we say things like it's not real, it doesn't exist, the more we minimize the impact and effect that it has on so many people. I was sharing with you, just different experiences, and we are talking about some experiences, and I was sharing with you, about racism and things like that. And I shared, I'll never forget when my family, we moved to Virginia. And in moving to Virginia, we didn't think anything of it. For those of you who don't know, I'm in an interracial marriage, right? And you would think, oh, there's no racism there, right? So it's amazing though that, my wife and I, we've been together since I was 14 years old, 15 years old.
Wow.
So it's not like we don't even think about it, going back to the red dot on the wall, your watch, right? Because we have been
Right.
together for so long. But I'll never forget when we moved to Virginia. We had, it was, my wife and my son. Trey was little. He may have been maybe 1 or 2, right? And we went
Right.
into a Bojangles. I'll never, and I don't listen, Naya. One thing you need to know about me is I don't play, especially when it comes to some Bojangles, spicy. Yeah.
It used
Uh,
to be better than they are
hey,
now, though. But I hear
well,
you.
you're right. But the thing, we went into the restaurant, and I'll never forget this lady. She was working there. And she says, well, how can I help you? And I'm looking at the menu. She said, well, I said, well, I ordered the chicken. She says, well, what kind do you want? You want white meat, or do you want the dark meat? And she says, let me guess, you want the white meat. And I was like,
No, no, Philip.
no, no, that's what she said. And now it was one of those things in which I was like, whoa, what what just happened here? Because again, I wasn't even used to that. That was something that,
Yes.
like, that didn't happen on a regular basis. Now it may have happened around us, but that wasn't something that was blatantly in front of us. And I think that's the thing with the Trojan horse. When
Yes.
subtle things can happen, and then they can happen so much that they kind of infiltrate you, and you don't even think about it, right? It's just kind of like,
Yeah.
whoa, because that blew my mind. I had another instance with
Wait a
my.
minute. Wait before you go on to
Okay,
that.
yeah, well,
How did you respond? I want to hear because there's something in the learning of how we respond that we can help others, right? How
well,
did you respond?
it was really interesting because, first of all, like just being totally honest and transparent, it was like, I got a punch from Mike Tyson in my chin,
Yes.
and it happened so quick. I was literally like, did she just say that? Like, did that, what I'm saying? Like, did that
Yeah.
really just happen here? And I didn't know what to say, and I think I responded with something. Honestly, I probably had a little smart comment, but I ain't gonna tell you exactly.
Knowing you did.
I ain't gonna say exactly what I said, but I will say this. It was a teachable moment
Yes.
for her, and my hope is that she didn't say that anymore to
Yeah.
people, because the reality is, you don't know what you don't know, and you're making assumptions about people that you've never met in your
Yes.
entire life. You know what I'm saying?
And you
Like,
don't. That's right. You
like
don't know me or my wife
you don't know us at all. And we
at all.
literally just went in there. I'm looking, and Terry Jones, he's speaking about microaggressions. And that, Terry, that's right. That's what it was. And I know Terry, and I know he was sitting there like, mind blown. Yes, that that
Mhm.
that
Mhm.
really that really happened. But
Yeah.
but we have to begin talking about things like this, because if we don't have the conversation, people pretend like these things don't even exist, nor do they
Well,
happen.
we get these little sayings like playing the race card.
Yep.
And wait, first of all, I have to share with people playing the race card. There is nothing that's playful
Mm-mm.
about being diminished, about being attacked,
That's good.
about being marginalized, about being invisible
That's right.
for some people. There is nothing playful about playing the card. There is no card that you can play that anybody would want to get into a game for that.
Mm,
So if it's a game for you, first of all, you already have some issues
right.
because it is a very demoralizing place to be in. Now, I would imagine, thank goodness your baby was only a year or two, but
Yeah.
imagine him standing there 14, 15, 16, 17 year watching his mother as well as his father
Yeah.
being disrespected as well as him because he's both, right?
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
we have to start being real about it. Talking about, I have to give you an example of mine that with my son, from the time he was little, I've taught him to be able to get into history, to talk about things that's going on, and to really read and know and watch and observe. So by the time he got into junior high, he was very well spoken on the
Mm-hmm.
subject of equity, inequities, and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So he was in junior high, and he and the principal got into an argument, and so the principal decided, I'm gonna put you on punishment. You're going home.
Mm-hmm.
So and my son was saying, you all got a race problem. He said, I'm not gonna hear it. I'm not gonna have it. So he had the social worker take my son and put him in the car. Well, in the community where I live is in Illinois, on the opposite side of town is where the poor social economic people live.
Mm-hmm.
We happen to live 5 blocks from the school.
Mm.
The person got in the car and drove Derek all the way on the other side of town and say, where do you live? And Derek said, down the street from the school. And he said, but you said you don't have any problem. Now he says, you're not looking at the way I dress, the way that I'm my only child, my mom
Right.
and dad are have great jobs. You're
Right.
not looking at any of that. You
Right.
not only took me to the north end of town, but you took me to the housing project and asked me where I live. Well,
Wow.
needless to say, he and the teacher argued all the way back to our house. So when they got to the house, she wanted me to discipline him. And I said, no, you're just upset because he showed you where
Right.
you all were coming from. Now
Right.
he deserved that first punishment. And like
Right.
I told her, I don't want you to take that punishment away because he should not be arguing with any adults.
Absolutely.
So if he had a problem, so that's going to stand. But you are not going to add anything on to him
Right.
because he showed you exactly, he allowed you to show yourself
Mm.
exactly what he meant.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now here's the 15-year-old kid showing you, yeah, you do have a problem. You all have problems. You know, your punishment is not all. And I had to tell him, boy, you're gonna be the death of me. But he was
Mm. And he, you said he was 15?
15.
Yeah.
And I had to, I'm like, oh my word, but he did. I mean, he didn't. When he got in that car, and she was upset. You let me drove all the way
All the way.
across town.
Wow.
Well, you should ask that question when you first got in the car.
Wow. Yeah, yeah. Well, it seems like that should be like a normal question, like, "Hey, where do you live? Where am I going?" Instead of
Yeah,
making an assumption that
that's exactly
you got to
right.
go to a certain
Mhm.
place. Yeah,
And
yeah.
so she was operating on our assumption. Was she a good person? Yes. Did I like her? Yes.
Mhm.
Did they have some issues? Yes.
Mhm. Mhm. And that right there, it's interesting that to even hear you say that, and I think that's powerful, right? Because we're
Mhm.
talking about racism or these and tendencies like this, but you're sitting there saying, you know what, did I like her? Yeah. You know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
that did not, like, take away from the fact that there was something that happened
Yeah.
that should
Yeah.
not have happened, right?
Would not have happened.
Wow.
And it's so sad. And when I think of you in your interracial relationship,
Yeah.
and I think of even your children and their experiences today, we have to stop pretending that, you hear a lot of the browning of Americas,
Yeah.
browning of Americas. Well, nowadays it's not just a black and white issue, although
Mhm.
that tends to be the greatest push and pull,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
it is all of the children of color
Mm.
and the white children
Yeah.
that are being impacted by these racial tendencies, the ads, the negativity, the mongering in such a way that it's dividing us. And so that, Trojan horse is
Yeah.
really doing damage throughout our land, and that is called racism.
Let me ask you this question, Nye, because my wife and I we've actually had many conversations about this, especially over the past couple years as we've seen what's happened with Ahmaud Arbery and
Yeah.
some of the things that we've seen in the news and the media. Can you remember your first experience where you recognized maybe that racism existed?
I was such a different kid. I grew up
Yeah.
in the 60s
Mm-hmm.
when it was in our face, right? It was
Mm-hmm.
just square in your face. When I first started in school, my world was a very black world,
Mm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
All of the teachers that black teachers lived in the neighborhood, the dentists lived in the neighborhood,
Mm-hmm.
and then when integration came along and we moved to other schools, and so I began to notice it. But the great thing, I started noticing racial differences
Mm-hmm.
when I was in my black neighborhood
Mm.
because we had one white family,
Mm-hmm.
and the young lady's name was Linda, that was in the same age
Mm.
group as me.
Mm-hmm.
And I would watch Linda, and I just wondered if she was really quiet or if
Mm.
she felt like she didn't fit in.
Wow.
So I began observing her at a very young age and looking at the difference.
Mm.
And so I could see that, I made sure I befriended her,
Mm-hmm.
and we got to know each other, but she was very quiet.
Mm.
Then later on, I noticed when she got into schools where there were more people that looked like her,
Mm-hmm.
that she blossomed. We remained friends, but a different part of her. So I began noticing in that. And of course, you always had the television on showing a march that Dr. Martin Luther
Right.
King,
Right.
Malcolm X, and all of them. So definitely saw it. There were several things that stood in my memory and I
Mm-hmm.
still talk about today.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that I noticed the neighborhoods that were allowed to, blacks had to stay here, whites had. So you got to see that
Mm-hmm.
clear marking, those demarcations that you don't go past here at night. Now, none of the signs of black here and white here, they were
Mm-hmm.
not up. The
Wow.
signage was not there.
Okay.
You
Okay.
knew they were there.
Right.
Just like today in some organizations, that
The
signage is up
signs is
there.
not up.
You
Yeah.
look and you can see the entire department is all white.
Yeah.
So now that we say we're going to do inclusion, you look and it's changed, but
Mm-hmm.
they're all white women. So
Mm.
that sign of blacks need not apply is still there. It is
Wow.
very visible. So I can make those connections. And for me, I tell people I was born a couple of months before Emmett Till was killed.
Mm.
So I think it's in my blood. I just
Mm-hmm.
started watching and noticing things. And so I was born a couple months before he was killed.
Mm-hmm.
And I really got to see some things and witness some things. And also, I made an effort to be a part of the movement, the
Mm-hmm.
change movement.
Mm-hmm.
So by the time I got in seventh grade, I was asked to be in the Big Ten. The Big Ten was the top 10 students
Mm-hmm.
that could come together and have discussions on race. Now, isn't that interesting? And we're saying, now that's back, I'm not going to say, but you all can pretty
That
much
was
guess.
that was a couple years ago. A couple years ago.
A couple of years ago.
Couple
But
years
now
ago.
the kids can't even talk about it. And we're really five black and five white
Wow.
kids. And we came together, and it was so interesting because I didn't see myself as a Big Ten, right?
Right.
I didn't, and most of the black children did not either.
Mm-hmm.
But I was selected to be on that, and
Mm.
was probably one of the greatest experiences of my life because it kept my eyes open. And but we also had forward teaching
Mm-hmm.
teachers, Mr. Brooks. He took us, he would say, black people have it rough, black people are poor,
Mm-hmm.
but I want to show you that there are whites like that too. And
Right.
he took us
Right.
to Appalachia, right? And
Wow.
so
Okay.
I had no idea that there were poor people that existed like
Oh
that.
yeah.
So for me, yeah, for me, I've been in this looking at using examples since 8 years old
Right.
and up.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah,
It's interesting because you talk about, and we're not gonna put no numbers on it, but as you grew up, the experiences, and I think about even as I grew up, the experiences that I had. I remember early on, my dad was in the military, and it was very interesting because inside of the military bubble on the base, it was strange as a child growing up because we all had commonalities. One of our
yes,
parents was in the military. So it was the experience was different. We got along pretty good. I'm not saying that things didn't exist, but we got along pretty good, right? Our
yeah,
parents got along pretty good. And you got to imagine, people being in the service, they had to go to the foxhole together. They was out the field.
yeah,
Like literally there are life or death situations in which they had to come together, right? So
yeah.
it was a different experience, but I'll never forget one day we were traveling from Texas to South Carolina, and my dad was driving, and he had been driving, all night, and all he wanted to do was find, just a hotel for, the family to be able to rest, for him to be able to get some rest. And never forget, he pulled over to this hotel. There were like no cars in the parking lot.
Mm,
No cars in the parking lot. The sign said vacancy,
yes. Mhm.
and so I think we're in Louisiana, maybe. I forgot where it was at, but anyways, never forget. My dad went in. It was starting to get late. My dad was tired. He'd been driving for a long time, and I'll never forget as a young kid the look on my dad's face when he came out of the hotel, because I'm just like, okay, it's time to go
I'm
inside the
tired.
hotel.
Yeah,
I'm sleepy. And
yeah.
my dad's face was, and he said, no, we're not gonna be staying here. And I'm like, what you mean? There are no cars. We should be going in. It's like, no,
Mhm.
we're not gonna be staying here. And I was like, oh, okay. But the look on his face, and like sometimes as parents, my parents, they could give each other looks, and something was happening. So I was trying to be nosy at my
Of
young
course.
age, and watching them, it came to the point to where I found out that the person told my dad that basically people like you can't stay here,
Wow.
even though they have vacancies. So
Mhm.
let me fast forward. So from there, my dad would always drive, but there would always be certain places that we stopped at, right?
Right.
There would be certain places we stopped to get gas. There would be certain places that we stopped, and we would go into the store. There would be certain places that we didn't stop at.
Yes.
And these were subtle things that I picked up. I picked up. And so remember, this happened when I was a little kid, but I picked up on this. I couldn't really understand it, but I watched this. So now I had these habits of when I would go places, there were certain places that I would stop. There were certain places that I wouldn't stop.
Yeah.
And I'll never forget, and this is so powerful, when my father-in-law and my dad were driving to help Carrie and I move from Louisville, Kentucky to here in Georgia where we currently live. My dad and my father-in-law in this U-Haul together. Older white man, older black man inside this U-Haul helping move, right? And
All related.
right, you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
Now watch this. My father-in-law had to use the bathroom, and my father-in-law pulled just he wasn't even thinking, he was just
Yeah.
oblivious. He had to use the bathroom. What's the next exit? He pulled on off, and he was like, Dennis, you coming in? My dad's like,
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. I
mm-mm.
won't be doing that. Mm-mm.
I won't be going in. And Pat
Mm-mm.
was like, but you said you need to use the bathroom too. He's like, I wouldn't be going in. So when my father-in-law comes back out, and he and my dad begin having a conversation, and my dad started sharing with him his
Mhm.
experiences about stopping different places, and about how he had been treated along the way. My father-in-law was like, Dennis, I am so sorry.
Yeah.
I never thought about that. I never thought about that. I didn't think about that. I was just thought, I'm so sorry. And they had this conversation. And the reason I bring that up is because it took me back to when I was a little boy. It
Yes.
took me back to what was happening in that conversation. And even to this day, there are certain places on my journey, even when I go visit my parents,
That
that
you
I
won't stop.
that I won't stop.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah, it's a lesson learned, and just so that our audience don't think that everything was in the past, I do want to share because I had a great high school, junior high experience. Coming up in the '60s is where you really saw races trying to come together.
Mm-hmm.
People talk now today. Today is better than ever. I would have to challenge that. I would have
Mm-hmm.
to challenge that because you actually saw the heart, the good heart of black, whites, Asians, everybody trying to come together and work
Right.
through this dilemma. And in 1995, my son, we worked very hard for him to go to Howard University.
Mhm.
By that time he went to Howard University, he and his father and I were divorced.
Mhm.
And so I was really carrying everything by myself, going through a difficult time.
Mhm.
So Derek came home in the summer so that he could work. And I'll never forget, he got a job working at a fast food restaurant down the street.
Mhm.
And he was scheduled to leave at about 9 p.m. And I remember the last thing I said to him was, Derek, just make sure you be careful out there. And so he's going to walk because it's a half a mile up the road.
Mhm.
He goes, oh, I will. And I dozed off and went to sleep. And the next thing I remembered was Derek pounding on the window, trying to
Wow.
break it down, getting in, screaming, Mom, help, help, hurry up. They're going to kill me. They're going to kill me.
Wow.
And, when you're coming out of your sleep, you're like, first of all, you're thinking you're dreaming. And
Mhm.
then when, I looked through the window and I saw sheer terror in his face.
Wow.
So I jumped up and I ran out, and my child's face was scratched up, chest scratched up,
Mm.
didn't have any shirt on. He's panting. He has asthma. He's getting into asthma attack. So it took me a while to calm him down. I'm like, what is going on? He
Mhm.
said, a group of men attacked me. They chased me. They chased me. And they were said they were going to kill me. And he said, what
Wow.
I did was he crossed the street because I went in Illinois,
Mhm. Mhm.
and I thank corn every time I see corn now. The corn was very high. And so he got into that cornfield and they weren't
Mm.
able to catch him. And so he was running and weaving in the cornfield, and he just remembered they saying, we're gonna kill you, we're gonna kill you. Well, I'm not gonna deny it. I said, well, go in the house, calm down, I'll be back. And I
Mm.
went out to look for them. I
Wow.
did. And I
Wow.
rolled up on them, having beers and laughing about what they had just done.
Wow.
And I noticed, I think I kind of blacked out too, because I got
Mhm.
right in one of them face.
Mhm.
And then the next thing I noticed were all of these black women started coming out, and black men started coming out their houses and surrounding, right? And the police came. Now, by this time, my son come out because he saw all the lights, the police lights, and that. And my son come up. And so they're like, what's going on here? Now, who do you think they went to defend? They
I don't think it
defended,
was you. I
yeah,
don't think it was you.
it wasn't me. They
Mm-mm.
went to defend the men that had attacked, brutalized my son.
Wow.
And it was so interesting in watching it. It's so surreal because they asked my son, what did you do to him? And my son had no clothes, no shoes, or nothing because they had beat almost everything and tore it off of him.
Mm.
And these men standing here with nothing. Now, they were young men, let me
Right.
say that. They
Right.
were about 26, 27 years of age, but they were still men.
Right.
And it was so interesting because they wanted to try to make it seem as if my son had done something. But in fact, my son was walking to work and they had been out drinking all day and looking
Mm.
for uh, a person to kill.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't for that corn, I know that I would not have a son today.
Wow.
I know they would have done it. And so
Powerful.
oftentimes when people talk, especially white people, when they say, we're just not aware, I said, no, you're not. I said, the average black person or person of color, and I'm going to add Asian in there
Mhm.
because they just won't say some of the things that happened to them.
Mhm.
If you were to ask them, they could tell you stories similar to mine.
Yeah.
It's just that when you go through the experience, when you experience things, you put it to a shelf. You may be unaware just because in fact, if people view this, those that know me will be shocked to even know that because that's not. But let me tell you the beauty. So I went into a deep funk over it. I really
Yeah.
did.
I can
I
imagine.
hear I was on boards of directors throughout the city, on Salvation Army boards of director, NAACP, Urban League, school board. I was on everything,
Yeah.
and so it just because it just took me out. And I will be honest, I started going to what I call the dark side.
Wow.
Did not want to be around white people. So I
Mm.
had the kind of job. a executive job that I could say I'm at work from home. So I sent a note out to my colleagues and my manager and said I won't be coming to work for a while. My son was attacked racially. I just don't want to be bothered. Just leave me alone. I'll do my work. And my colleagues, save one, were white,
Mm-hmm.
and they let it go for a couple of days, and then they said no. We are not going to allow you to be by yourself. No, we're coming over to check on you. We want to talk to you. And that was the graceful thing to do,
Yeah.
because had they not done that, I'm not sure that I could have come out of that darkness in the right spirit that I needed to.
Yeah.
And so to say that race isn't happening even to our children, I think about what your young daughter just recently went through,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
We got to start telling these stories so that people know that this is
That
going on,
this is
that
real.
Trojan horse is live. And so I would like for you to share that, if you would, to see that it's not just us adults who have choices. We
Yeah.
can choose. It's a choice to act upon racial things, and we can choose not to. But
Yeah.
when we involve children, they have no choice.
Absolutely. You know, and it's interesting. I'm going to share two stories real quick. One with my son. And this is just real quick. You know, I'll never forget. You know, when he was in about sixth or seventh grade. You know, kids had a party, and he remembers this vividly. The kids had a party, and you know, it was a party that he was not invited to, and you know, he didn't think anything of it. You know what I'm saying? I mean, kids
Yeah.
don't get invited to parties all the time, but I'll never forget. One of his friends, his mother called Carrie frantic, and she was fit to be tied. And you know, she shared with Carrie what happened, and this was what happened. She got to the party, and the kids said, well, why isn't, you know, my son there? And this was a pool party, and the comment was, well, we didn't want him to turn the water brown.
Oh, wow.
Now again, my son is oblivious to this. He does not know this. He didn't
What
hear.
year? What year?
This was this wasn't that long ago now. I mean,
That's my point. I
yeah,
just want to make sure.
this ain't that long ago. I mean, my son
Okay.
is 25 now.
Okay.
So this ain't that long ago.
Yeah.
Um, but literally, the mom called. She was frantic. She went off on everybody over there, and
Oh,
she called you know, Carrie, and she just apologized profusely, and she was so sorry, and she, you know, her husband's an attorney, and she's just like, how can this be happening now,
today. Yeah.
today, in
Mhm.
this world that we live in? How?
Mhm.
And it's real. So that's one instance. And then, you know, just last year, you know, my daughter and her friends, you know, they're going to, you know, a football game. They get out of a car, gentleman, Caucasian gentleman. He thinks that they hit his car. The kids didn't hit his car. He starts going off on them. He basically starts cussing them out. Long story short, a whole group of people like came up. They blocked in my daughter and her friends. They would not let them leave.
Mm.
Literally wouldn't. And here's the thing: they didn't do anything wrong. And
Mhm.
for us, you know, that was bad enough. I mean, you talk about, like, my daughter was petrified. I mean, this is in the height of everything that's happening,
Mhm.
and she's like, I can't believe this is happening right
Mhm.
here, right
Mhm.
now. And the lady who came and blocked in the kids, she didn't even know what was going on, but she pulled in her truck and she says, I'm not letting you all leave until the police get here. Man, we didn't even do anything.
Mhm.
But this is the
Mhm.
reality. And then the bigger part for me was, I mean, this is a football game. So
Yeah.
all these people are walking into the football game, and you're telling me all these people walked into the football game, and they were all seeing this, and
Yes.
nobody would stop.
come to your child rescue.
Yeah.
Nobody would say, wait a minute, we folks, we need to back it up. And see, that is the beautiful thing. We had a lot of horrific things happen in the 60s, 70s. It's never
Yeah.
stopped. But you saw people really trying to come together and would stand up and stop. I remember when Derek was little, and we were going over on the University of Illinois, and this guy driving by and threw something out on to us, and I had my his little friend with him and called us racial names. And
Mm.
this white guy ran up and ran to that car, and he tried to pull that guy out of that car. And I don't advocate for violence,
Mm-hmm.
but when you see two little children and a single woman
Mm.
there with the child,
Mm-hmm.
you would just walk by. When you see little children, young adults who are very impressionable, and you would just walk by and leave them to basically a mob,
Yeah.
because that's what they are. Let's call them what they are, a
Right.
mob, and not say and do anything. And then people say, how did we get here? That's how we got here.
So let me
Just like that.
so let me ask you this, Naya. I know professionally, this is the field that you are in. You've been working in this field for years.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we talked about like real situations, and like these are real. These are real. I mean, these aren't fabricated. They're just real situations. But what can we share with the people, or what can you share with the people that would give them some insight as to tools, tips, some things that they may be able to learn. I know you're doing your we have the series on allyship right now. We have the 5-part series on allyship and things like that. So are there any specific things that come to mind that you can share with them, because the Trojan horse is real. But what
Yes,
can
it
what
is.
can we do to not allow it to become oblivious and allow the Trojan horse to
Yeah.
sneak into our world and continue to destroy
I-
us?
There are several things. I will tell folks the strategies that were used in the 60s, we need to bring back. And what I mean by that is having compassion and a heart. Andrew Young just turned 90 years old the other day, and they did a big series on him. And he was sharing with them about his wife's. One day he was just fed up. Andrew Young, for those of you that do not know or may be unaware, was the mayor of Atlanta for a long time. He also served in a public office, and he was a mentor to or ally partner with Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And he had gotten so fed up one day, he had shared with his wife he couldn't take it anymore. He didn't want to have anything to do with the folks with hooded, hooded this and hooded that. And I don't want to mess with the KKK. I just hate them. And his wife said, the day that you forget that there is a heart underneath that hood is the day you need to stop doing what you're doing. So I
Wow.
say all that, yes, powerful. I
Wow.
say all that to say this. You have to have a heart for people no matter what,
Yeah.
no matter the circumstances. We have to bring empathy back. Yes, we have to recognize the problem. We have to recognize it's just not a black and white problem, to see what is happening to Asians, to see what is happening to Native Americans,
Mm-hmm.
to see what's happening to Hispanic. We got to look at it from all viewpoints and stop all of the hyperbole and the emotions. That we got to take out of that, number one. And then also, we also must begin to look at how do we strategize to create an environment where people can ask, and I'm going to say this to black people in particular,
Mm-hmm.
where people can ask, a white person can ask you a question. If you want to answer, then answer. But if you don't, say, I'm not comfortable getting into that,
Mm-hmm.
but
Mm-hmm.
answer them and not belittle, not become so angry that we can't respond to the
That's good.
question. Because, especially if you're in this line of business that you and I are in,
Yeah.
because if you can't respond in a humane way, then get out of the way, because you have no business being in this
That's good.
realm.
That's
And,
good.
and so that's something else we have to do, because we all come from different experiences and we all can help each other, but we have to recognize that some people are never going to change,
Yeah.
but and that's their right to not change.
Mm-hmm.
But we
Mm-hmm.
can always have compassion for people. We can strategize rather than argue and fight. We can look at things through the lens of how can we make it better and leave it better for the next generations that come after us,
Yeah.
and really know your history. One of the reasons I believed in the Black Lives Matters, I think that's a great thing. I never marched with Black Lives Matters because
Mhm.
I didn't believe in that. They had no strategy. They'll
Mm.
get there, but they had no strategy.
Mhm.
And they didn't know. Back in the day, you knew who was going to be marching.
Right.
So if they're a rebel rouser, they're coming in, then you would know them because they're not on the docket. You have to go through training to be
Mhm.
able to march. And why I push on empathy is because I've seen some things that's very hurtful.
Mhm. Mhm.
When the law enforcement, the female that was just found guilty
Mhm.
in Minnesota for thought she had pulled the taser out and it was the
Pull it.
gun,
Right.
and when the verdict came out, in my day, Dr. King, Reverend Sharpton, and all the others would have got down on their knees and prayed for both sides.
Right.
But what did we see instead? People jumping up, laughing, dancing, and partying.
Right.
The demise of anybody on either side of that is nothing to have a victory march on.
Right.
And so that's number one. And then to be honest, they need to call people like you and I that
Mm.
can have real conversations, not this fluff, not this pretense,
Mhm.
not this afraid to use the word race,
Mhm. Mhm.
but
Mhm.
really have these conversations where people don't feel that they are being beaten up for their perspective, but really to have that dialogue to really begin to bring about change, even first and foremost in that nine
That's right. And I think
and that heart.
what you just said is critical. Head change and heart change, right? Those two
Mhm.
things right there are the impetus to see global change, to see
Yeah.
cultural change, to see local change, head change and heart change. I'll never forget my dad. He always says, you don't always have to see eye to eye to walk hand in hand,
Ooh,
and that's
would you say that again?
you don't have to
That's
see
powerful.
eye to eye to walk hand in hand.
You
Meaning,
don't.
we don't always have to agree with everything.
Mm-mm.
But when it comes down to it, we can walk together knowing that you're an amazing human being, I'm an amazing human being, and
Hmm.
that right there, that commonality is enough. We
Yeah,
don't
it
gotta
is.
we don't gotta go to the movies and go hang out. We don't gotta do all that stuff. But what
That's
we
right.
can say is I respect you as a human
Yeah.
being. One of my prize pictures and photos and memories that I have right now is I'll never forget during my graduation, my grandfather um, came to visit us, and this was before he transitioned, and Carrie's grandfather was at our house, and they were outside together, sitting in these rocking chairs. These two, they're probably 80 plus years old, sitting in these rocking chairs, sharing old World War II stories and
Yeah.
stuff. But I was like, you know what? Again, they both had experiences in life, some good, some bad, some, different. But you know what? But they can sit there right now. They don't have to see eye to eye on everything, but they can walk hand in hand and say we're
Well,
gonna
I
be
want
here
to
and we're
share
gonna do it.
one last story,
Go
family
ahead.
story on my end, and it has to do with my white side and the black side. And
Yeah,
I
this is
don't
good.
mean the biracial side,
This is
but the
good right
white
here.
side. And so when I remember because I'm so into healing race relations and really healing relationships, period, with people, and I did a DNA a great background to see where my blood lineage went. Well, it matched me up to a number of whites. And so two of the individuals contacted me and we started having conversations. Now, I say white because back in 1800s in my family, there were five brothers and four married white women, one married black, and that was unheard of back in the 1800s. So
Mm-hmm.
he moved away with his black wife because he didn't feel comfortable around everybody. So therefore, we were the only ones, the lineage from that Nathaniel Middlebrooks all the way down. Okay, and so the others. So now we hook back up with all of the ones that are all white, no interracial, anything, right? And so we decided to start having get togethers to get
Wow.
to know each other and to do our, and I'll never forget my cousin Dale, who is white. She said, I just have to be honest with you, Naya. Some whites are not going to come to this
Wow.
because, they're not comfortable with this and they don't want to be a part of it. And I said, Dale, I have to be honest with you. Some of the blacks don't either. So it doesn't matter what side it is. And
Right.
it's not, it's just where you are on that journey. Now, when I went to meet them and I went to the hotel, there was lots of folks in the hotel. It was so funny. I walked right up to them and I said, "You're my cousin." Because their behaviors and mannerisms were
Right.
exactly like ours, right? We
Right.
look nothing alike, but just awesome. And when we can start doing things like that, learning from the past, not repeating the past, not
Right.
reliving the past,
Right.
but learning from the past and making a better future, we're going to do a better job. But at the end of the day, we have to stop this nonsense and politics. The Trojan horse is there. I used to admire Donald Trump. I used to admire him. I do not admire him. What he did to this country, I don't care. It's not politics. I'm not really a Republican or a Democrat,
Mm-hmm.
right? I
Mm-hmm.
just, I'm not into that. I am American. And
Mm.
what you did and unleashed in this country, we need to stop and say, stop it to everybody. I don't care if you're a preacher. I don't care if you're a politician. I don't care if you're a teacher. I
Mm-hmm.
don't care if you're the CEO. We as a nation are not going to tolerate hatefulness. And
Mm.
we need to stop it in its tracks. Others are looking at us. They see that great divide
Mm-hmm.
and they used it against us. And we have to recognize the path that we're on will destroy us all.
Wow.
It will. It just will.
Wow. Wow. So listen, Naya, this has been another amazing elephant conversation. We gonna be coming and bringing these people to elephant conversation because guess what? Somebody got to talk about it. Somebody got to
Somebody
talk
else.
about it, and
Yeah.
doggone it, we are gonna be the people who talk about it. So let me ask you. I know we have some courses that are out there and that are available. Some things that people may be interested in. How can they get in contact with you via your website and whatnot? Can you share that with the people?
Yeah, if you would log on to NiaLynnAssociates.com, that's my website, and you'll find that information there. Also, with Phillip, what's your information? Just check either one of us
Yep.
out. You can
Yep.
get information, and we will be more than happy to come and work with you.
Absolutely, absolutely. So listen, we appreciate you all for tuning in and joining us today. If you are checking us out via the replay, please make sure you put something in the comment section. Say hello to us. Let us know where you are commenting and chiming in from. We love to connect with you. And listen, if you heard anything today that helped you, do us a favor and go ahead and share this out. You never know what people here that can change their head and can change their heart. Because when we do those two things, guess what? We can change this entire world. So, with that being said, Naya, Phillip, we are out of here and we will see you on the next Elephant Conversations. Y'all take care now.
Bye.
Bye, y'all.